Jo, a mom of 2 children, had worked tirelessly for the past 6 months, saving up to surprise them with a trip to Disneyland. When the day finally came, her kids were beaming with happiness. Wearing Mickey Mouse ear headbands and Marvel outfits, their ear-to-ear smiles made it all worth it. Till disaster struck, and those cheerful smiles descended into absolute chaos. It was Friday, July 19th, 2024, by coincidence, Jo's birthday. The family was waiting for their flight to depart when suddenly blue screens of death started coming up all over the airport. However, that wouldn't be the biggest tragedy of the day, as this wasn't a one-off. Airports all around the world started going out one by one. Even I was personally held up at the Billund airport due to the bug. I was meant to fly to Rome, and that would turn into a night that I'll never forget. Thousands of families divided, meetings canceled, the entire world held their breath in tension as critical infrastructure around the world went offline. This is the story of CrowdStrike. It started quietly. Offices were just opening across Europe. Business was already in full swing in Asia, but in the US, everyone was still asleep, completely unaware that their morning was about to implode. Because sometime before dawn, a single computer in the States pushed out a routine security update. It was for Falcon, CrowdStrike's flagship software. Most people haven't heard of Falcon. It's not something that you install at home. It's what banks, hospitals, airlines, big businesses use to keep their networks clean. CrowdStrike sells protection at scale. When something suspicious happens on a company's machine, Falcon is the software checking if it's malicious and neutralizing the threat before it can do damage. It's antivirus software. A quirk of these products is that they can't sit still. New viruses are coming out literally by the minute, so they have to constantly update in the background, refreshing their threat databases and detection profiles several times a day. If they don't, it can become open season. Viruses can spread insanely fast, tearing through thousands of machines in hours, just like what we saw in my video on WannaCry. So when this update rolled out in the middle of the night, nothing was unusual. It was part of the standard procedure of rapid security, and the company's vice president surely didn't expect to be grilled by US lawmakers a month later for this exact practice.
Thank you for your question and your comments. We release 10 to 12 of these content updates every single day. And so that was part of our standard operating procedure.
Normally, software companies will push updates in stages, first to a small group, then once confirmed safe, the entire user base. But CrowdStrike didn't do this. Updates were always sent out to everyone all at once. CrowdStrike had been walking a tightrope for years, balancing speed against safety, and on July 19th, they finally slipped. One file was responsible for what would turn into a global crash, the blue screens that Jo and others would soon be seeing at airports around the world. It was called Channel File 291. Channel files instruct the Falcon antivirus on what it should recognize as a threat. Like he said, they release 10 to 12 of these a day. So why this time did it throw the world into a blue screen mayhem? Now, weird things have been happening all around us. The nights feel longer, the shadows deeper. And I think it started after I played Watcher of the Realms, the sponsor of this video. They've just dropped their long-awaited classic Dracula crossover. You earn this powerful legendary hero completely free through diverse battle stages and unpredictable encounters. The new Count Dracula delivers insane burst damage for powerful single-target attacks. Lady Mina has exceptional AoE control abilities, and Van Helsing is a damage-dealing marksman with devastating AoE explosions. Plus, the event's packed with generous free rewards, summons, and even minigames to test your skills. You don't want to miss out because Watcher of the Realms includes more than 200 heroes with highly strategic and immersive combat, like captivating boss battles. It not only has stunning CG and top-notch audiovisual effects, but also has a lot of convenient features like auto fights and custom gear enhancement tools to help new players catch up to old. So, are you ready to become a vampire? I took their Dracula personality test and I'm the Blood King Dracula. It's a pretty cool looking guy if you ask me. Now it's your turn. Click the event link in the description below to test your Dracula personality and scan the QR code to download Watcher of the Realms for free, now on PC, Android, and iOS. So why this time did it throw the world into a blue screen mayhem? To understand that, we need to go back a few months. At the end of winter, a proper update was implemented. Real code changes to Falcon's sensor, allowing it to check for new suspicious methods of malware communication. The code was subject to rigorous testing. No issues surfaced during the quality assurance process. Everything seemed perfect until July and Channel File 291, because the code had a bug that wasn't ready for this one channel file.
The content file triggered an issue within the kernel sensor, so that when the configuration, it is almost like if you think about a chessboard trying to move a chess piece to someplace where there's no square. That's effectively what happened inside the sensor. So when it tried to process the rule, it was not able to do what the rule was asking it to do, which triggered the issue within the sensor.
It told Falcon to reference something that didn't exist. The software tried to access data stored in a pointer, basically a reference to a spot in the computer's memory, but that was empty. In programming, it's called an out-of-bounds memory read. When the system tried to use it as real data, the operating system panicked, causing an instant kernel crash, aka the blue screen of death. But this is actually a trivial bug for programmers. They deal with it every day. So how did it crash 8.5 million devices in minutes?
In my district, passengers at Newark Liberty International Airport experienced delays and cancellations. Some New Jersey hospitals had to delay or cancel procedures, and some 911 dispatch centers were even rendered inoperable, jeopardizing public safety.
The empty data bug was the first strike. Millions of Windows devices could have been saved if it wasn't for the simultaneous rollout. The content update was automatically pushed to every single device online at the time.
Was closely related to how you released the software update. So I'd like to go back to the topic of a phased rollout approach. I believe you were describing this change when you used the phrase concentric circles.
No phases, no staggered updating. Critical infrastructure, hospitals, airports, government offices, 911 dispatch went down as the update hit their systems. If CrowdStrike had only sent it first to a couple of companies, it could have seen the problem before it affected the entire world. Yet that didn't happen because the configuration file was a relatively minor change, so they thought. Even in their worst nightmares, they did not expect this. That was the second strike, but the synchronized global update alone still shouldn't be enough to crash millions of computers, so let's keep digging. The last little problem lies in the kernel. The kernel is the beating heart of the operating system. It operates on what they call ring 0. Standard users will never directly interact with it, and for good reason. For your average vibe coder, it's too dangerous to work on a kernel level. Not only because it's easy to brick an entire system, but it poses a big security risk, as the kernel has unlimited access to the system. In exceptional cases, companies get to operate on it, and CrowdStrike was one of them. It takes a great responsibility to do this. If you want to write code to run on the Windows kernel, you need to get yourself a Windows Hardware Quality Labs certification. I mean, it's not strictly needed, of course. You can cowboy this stuff, but if you don't have it, customers will probably run away, seeing you as untrustworthy. To acquire this certification, you need to submit your driver to Microsoft for a demanding check. Drivers are small software programs in the kernel that allow the operating system to communicate with the hardware. If, say, you wanted to subscribe to my channel, your brain sends out a signal to your hand to do the job. Likewise, computer drivers let software tell the hardware what to do. Drivers are essential for the device to function correctly. That's why Microsoft runs them through multiple tests to properly investigate them before allowing them to get their stamp of approval. So why does CrowdStrike need access to all of this anyways? If you control the kernel, your grasp on device security widens. It gives their Falcon antivirus more power to find and fight viruses.
Concerning because when a threat actor gains access to a system, they would seek to disable security tools. And in order to identify that that's happening, kernel visibility is required to see when that's occurring.
Some viruses even infect the kernel for this exact reason, so Falcon needs the highest level of control to stop them. But getting the Microsoft certification of driver releases takes some time. If you're, for example, a graphics card developer, it's no problem. You just get that thing approved before releasing your new product. But you'll probably see where this is going. It's a different story when you work in the cybersecurity field. You can't wait for Microsoft to check your every update. You don't have time. Hackers won't wait until the testing is finished. You can't afford it. So instead, you gotta bend the rules a little bit. Instead of making changes to the driver itself, you modify the content and data with which it interacts. What happened on July 19th is a certified driver running uncertified files. One of them was channel file 291. If you get a bug in user mode, ring 3, the app crashes, but if you have an issue on the kernel level, the entire device has a problem. And that was strike 3. You roll out a kernel level bug to computers worldwide, and in the blink of an eye, 8.5 million Windows devices crash at 4:09 UTC. All hell breaks loose. What people were afraid would happen in Y2K actually happened. People were sent into a panic as infrastructure crashed around the world. I was actually in Denmark, caught a bus to Billund Airport where I was to catch a flight to Rome, to ultimately meet up with a member of the Crumb team. I remember getting the news on that bus ride that CrowdStrike had nuked millions of systems. When we arrived at the airport, flights were being delayed and canceled left and right. And this is right next to a Legoland, so there's tons of sad and confused kids there, pitching fits, and then you've got the parents trying to calm them. It was a whole mess, but I was flying Ryanair, and anyone who knows that airline knows that there was zero chance they would cancel. And so we waited. As other flights were being canceled, ours on the screen just kept getting pushed back an hour, then another hour. I was pretty hopeful because they released a statement saying that their systems were not affected, but still, this delay was a direct result. We didn't end up waiting 1 hour or 3 hours, we ended up waiting 12 hours. I was trying to find hotels to stay at or push the flight to the next day. Like, I really hate flying because you start your trip in misery and you end it in misery, but this by far took the cake. When we finally took off, I thought we made it. We beat the outage. I sent my friend a message saying that we'd get a hotel in Rome, stay the night when we landed, then catch the train to Naples in the morning. Oh, how naive I was. Billund is a fairly small airport. Rome is not. When we landed, it was like walking into a war zone. The entire airport was packed with thousands of stranded travelers. To make matters worse, my SIM card wasn't working. I couldn't make calls. Every hotel in the city was full, and there was absolutely no free outlets, which was a problem because my phone was dying and they didn't have those delicious little hot dogs that they have in Denmark. And it was hot. I mean, I'm from Canada. It was like 35 CO. People were sleeping everywhere under benches, on the conveyor belt. We ended up bundling up on the cold cement floor. Others had even taken over the check-in terminals because they've got those big comfy computer chairs. Like, it was chaos. Downstairs from this little restaurant area, there was a group of people rioting because they thought that it was like a Karen at the check-in line not letting them take off. Police officers were involved. They're like trying to push their way through the gate, not understanding that the problem was they literally didn't have the infrastructure to even board people correctly. And since we arrived in Rome so late, we missed our train to get down to Naples. And so we had to spend the night. And the first bus rides out of there, those were full. The first trains out of there, those also had already booked up. And so we eventually got a slot, I think it was around 8 or 9 in the morning, to take the train down to Naples. And when we got on it, I sent this message to my friend. To top it off, when we finally arrived at the train station, he had fallen asleep. He was up all night with us trying to call hotels, whatnot. Was meant to pick us up, and so I spam called him. He eventually woke up and we got it all sorted out. Anyways, that's just a little inconvenience that I suffer, but it really pales in comparison to the emergency rooms and the 911 operators all around the world that had to cancel their service due to the outage. And that's why, away from all of this chaos, system admins were trying their hardest to get things running again. But how do you restore 8.5 million Windows machines that have been bricked? Jerry Lever, the IT director at GHJ, an accounting and tax firm in LA, had just brushed his teeth and gone to bed. He checked his phone for one last time at 10:30 p.m. before closing his sleepy eyes. But he wouldn't get to sleep because there was an urgent message from his company that their computer systems had gone down due to the CrowdStrike bug. He blinked at the screen, first a little confused. Then came another alert and a third. Lever later said, quote, "I had a moment of worry, then a moment of understanding that we are trained to handle this situation. You don't have a lot of time to stay in the panic because you have to get things online as soon as possible." By the time Jerry made it to the office, CrowdStrike engineers had already found and published a fix. They had identified the broken channel file responsible and posted steps to revert that to an earlier version, one that didn't reference the missing pointer inside the kernel. But there was a catch. There was no automatic way to do this because all the Windows machines were blue screened, had to be a manual process. And so system admins around the world started scrambling to fix literally 8.5 million machines. To revive them, they had to reboot the machines several times while connected to a network, which would actually provide a small opportunity to download the reverted channel file before the old one would load up and crash the machine. Often machines had to be rebooted several times for this to work, but for many, this first option didn't work at all. Instead, what they would have to do is boot the system into safe mode and then start digging through the system's hidden folders to delete the faulty channel file by hand. Yeah, this is an option that boomers at the office, there was just no way they were going to do it themselves. Even though it is fairly easy to get into safe mode, if you've ever worked at an an office, you know what it's like. And for the IT workers that this all fell on, at the large-scale companies, they were encountering another problem. See, many large organizations use BitLocker to encrypt their disk. And so to get into the machine, you have to decrypt it with a 48-digit numeric recovery key that's unique for each machine and has to be typed out by hand. This made the work even more frustrating, even more painfully slow. But that's not all. Some of the companies were storing their BitLocker keys on Windows servers, which now, of course, had crashed, and so they were stuck with no real way out but to actually rebuild their systems from the ground up or hope that the reboot technique would finally work. Back to Jerry. He had pulled his team together for an after-hours emergency. By 3 a.m., they managed to get all their servers back up and running, and by 10 a.m., they got all the company's workstations back online too. This was horrible news for the employees that were hoping for a day off, but for Jerry, it was a moment of celebration. He went to his favorite restaurant and got a nice, juicy burger, but for others around the world, this was just the beginning. Kyle Haas, a systems engineer in Louisville, didn't get to sit in an office at all. He spent the entire day driving from one client to another, reviving their dead networks. But the one that stuck out to him the most was the city's water company. They were just minutes away from losing their ability to test their water supply, and it was him fixing their system that brought that back up online. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the impact was hitting the medical world the hardest. General practitioner Francis O'Hagan would later say, "We couldn't do anything for most people. We just had to take it on the chin and get on with it." That's because nearly 75% of the doctors in Northern Ireland rely on a program called EMIS, a medical record system that handles everything from prescriptions to patient histories. They were helpless. And in the north of England, GP David Wrigley described the same chaos in his clinic. Quote, "Friday was one of the toughest single days in recent times for general practitioners across England. Without a clinical IT system, many were forced to return to pen and paper to be able to serve their patients. While doctors and their teams worked hard to look after as many as they could, without access to the information they needed, much of the work has had to be shifted into the coming week. We're talking about cancer referrals, delayed routine appointments postponed, and the hardest was the urgent care that couldn't wait. From Friday to Monday, doctors were effectively flying blind, and when their systems finally came back online, they had an awful backlog to catch up on. In Surrey, radiotherapy for 50 patients waiting for treatment had to be postponed, only to be saved by the thousands and thousands of system admins around the world scrambling to restore the millions of computers, all by hand. Meanwhile, Kaspersky Lab, another big player in the world of antivirus programs, was laughing at CrowdStrike on Facebook. And they weren't the only ones, because China, Russia, and Iran were untouched. China's push for self-sufficiency meant that they didn't rely on CrowdStrike products, and Russia and Iran didn't use CrowdStrike because of international sanctions. And it was truly their lucky day, because when the dust settled and all the systems started coming back online, the top 500 US companies counted their financial losses at $5.4 billion. That's lost revenue, disrupted operations, the recovery cost, and now they will be looking to CrowdStrike for payback. CrowdStrike's entire reputation was on the line. The company knew that they had to do more than apologize. It needed to restore trust in its software. Lawsuit-wise, I actually think they felt insulated by their terms of service, which limited their liability, but having customers continue using their software doesn't come from legal protections, and their share price had already dropped from over $350 to $200 in the wake of the bug. If they were going to recover, they had to own this mistake. Someone in the VP team thought that this meant issuing $10 Uber Eats vouchers to some of the affected clients, but that didn't go over well. Even worse, when people began complaining that upon trying to redeem them, they were getting an error message saying, quote, "This voucher has been canceled by the issuing party." Pretty big failure because this made news rounds. And they also released the typical PR statements apologizing, first from the CEO and then from the chief security officer on LinkedIn. But this was met with strong criticism in the comments. Rightfully so. The question that kept getting posted over and over again was, how come this wasn't tested on a small batch of users first? And that would be a question that CrowdStrike would now have to answer in front of Congress. They had seemingly failed in the public eye, but now, could they succeed in front of the government? The hot seat was taken by the already mentioned CrowdStrike Vice President, Adam Myers. After reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, he needed to start with some apologies.
On behalf of everyone at CrowdStrike, I want to apologize. We're deeply sorry, and we are determined to prevent this from ever happening again.
The committee proceeded to hammer him on questions about quality assurance practices and reasons for kernel-level software. Adam, as a response, pledged that moving forward, the company is using far more rigorous checks and tests before rolling out any update, even these small ones. He promised that CrowdStrike has already implemented what they are calling concentric rings approach to updates. Basically, updates will now be deployed in phased batches to limited numbers of customers before expanding out into wider and wider groups. If a bug happens, only one ring of customers is affected, not the entire customer base. Therefore, they have a bit of a heads up to correct it before millions of systems are affected again. This is standard practice in tech companies. Typically, it's what they call a phased rollout. And Adam, of course, was desperately justifying why they were not following this before. In the end, CrowdStrike avoided a large public fine, but still, even despite their terms of service, some customers decided to sue. Delta Airlines, for example, has an open case against them, alleging gross negligence and seeking damages of roughly $500 million because the outage caused 7,000 canceled flights. A state court ruled in May 2025 that Delta can proceed with this claim, but no final judgment or settlement has been publicly announced yet. Investors also filed a class action lawsuit accusing CrowdStrike of misleading them about how well tested its updates were, but no settlement or final ruling has been made public yet, and the damages are unspecified. In the end, their terms of service may limit the amount of money they end up paying out in these lawsuits, but it's still a reminder for all the other software providers to do better. With so much critical infrastructure relying on these IT giants, it was only a question of time before something like this happened. And I would say it's only a question of time before it happens again, but literally just this past week, AWS went down, knocking off thousands of businesses from Fortnite to banking apps. Every day, the whole world hangs in the mercy of just a few companies, and often the redundancy to prevent these outages is not implemented due to the cost. And so when these outages do happen, companies just see them as a cost of doing business, but the reality is, for some systems, it's a matter of life or death. And it's only a matter of time before we see the blue screens again.